Hello everybody. This week I'm taking a bit of a break from the usual YouTube fare of supercars, ultra rare exotics and impossibly expensive machinery. And I'm focusing on something that I think is far more exciting. Cars that normal people can actually afford. Now in the last episode I looked at the Kia Picanto. £12,000 for potentially all the car you might ever need. However, if you're in the market for a small city car and you want something with a slightly posher badge, this might be what you're after. This is an Audi A1, more specifically the A1 Citycarver. And much like the Picanto X-Line, this is Audi's attempt at making a slightly bigger version of their smaller car.
Now, quite honestly, cars like this do make a mockery of the whole micro SUV segment, populated by things like Audi's own Q2. After all, this is simply an A1, but a bit taller. It's got all of the space of an A1 and more than enough ground clearance for anyone that doesn't live up a mountain with no road going to their house. And let's be honest here, you do drive on roads, don't you?
Now, cars like this are often aimed at a younger buyer, and for that reason this whole angles on everything thing that Audi are going for these days actually works really well on this small vehicle. And it even looks pretty good in Mazzano red too. Rear stowage in the Citycarver is actually pretty decent. Not an amazing amount of space, but for this class of car, it's good enough. The rear seats have a 60-40 folding split, and there's actually plenty of room back there for normal-sized adults as well. Up front, you have an impressive amount of technology from its larger, more expensive stablemates. And this being a press car, of course, there are a few options on it, but not too many. The tech pack gives you Audi's navigation system, a larger center screen, their nice virtual cockpit and wireless phone charging. I'd consider that at about £1,700 fairly essential. The comfort and sound pack is another £1,150 and gets you these half-decent B&O speakers, heated seats and a reversing camera and parking sensors. The only other real option on this car is the oddly named Plus pack, which gets you an armrest and dual zone climate, and is about £700. The overall impression, inside and out, is of a car which is considerably more premium than the little Picanto that we had on the channel. And that's just as well, because at £28,000, this car is nearly the same price as two top-spec Picantos. That's pretty much the same amount of money as my friend Stuart paid for his last of line S1. And that car's a little firecracker with a really peppy 2-litre turbocharged engine and 4-wheel drive. So under the bonnet, this has something similar, right? Simply put, no. Now this is rather embarrassing and nearly never happens with press cars, but it would appear that Audi have forgotten to put all the cylinders in this one, because I can count only 3 of them. Now combined, they add up to a total of 1 whole litre, but fortunately there's a small turbocharger helping them along, and so it makes 116 horsepower. Unlike the Kia, you do have a choice of gearboxes, and this car is equipped with the 7-speed dual-clutch S-tronic system. So with not much power and a very high price, can this car at least drive as well as an Audi should? You see, that massive price differential puts this Audi into a completely different category. For £12,000, you're not really going to be worried if the interior feels a little bit out of date or it's missing all of the latest gizmos. However, at nearly £30,000 for what is on paper a very similar car, the A1 really does have its work cut out. And at that price, this is far less likely to be the sort of car that a young person just goes and casually buys themselves. I know that is the kind of audience this car is probably aimed at, but the truth is this is just as likely to be bought by a pair of wealthy parents for Tarquin to learn to drive in and then to take himself off to boarding school with. That means the people buying these may well have experience of a lot of other cars, a lot of other Audis quite likely. The good news is that if you are familiar with the current Audi lineup, you are of course going to be right at home in one of these. There's a few things that I don't like. What I'm arguing with all of this week is the data module thing that this car has. So it can take over from the SIM on your phone, and I think you're then supposed to connect to it as a Wi-Fi hotspot, and the whole thing just doesn't work. And what it means is that every 5 minutes this thing's cropping up with a new box and distracting you and asking you to do something or tick something, or do you want to do this, do you not want to do that? you know what, I kind of miss the simplicity of old systems where I just connect Bluetooth to the car. Driving this car is fairly pleasant. You do feel like you're in a reasonably elevated driving position, and unlike many small cars like this that I've driven, it's reasonably comfortable too. It's not super plush and cosseting, and in actual fact I've just got out of a 20-valve Quattro, which was a little more comfortable than this, but let's ignore that. For a modern small car, it's all right. The steering actually is very nice indeed, and I suspect you may be able to have a little bit of fun with it, but we'll find that out later. What's more important is the basics in a car like this. How easy is it to place? Can you drive it? Can you see out of it? Well, it scores reasonably well in that regard. Front visibility is okay. You do have the feeling of being up high in a small car, which is exactly what this is. So it feels like you're looking through a letterbox, but after a little while you realise you can see everything you need to. Rear visibility is less ideal, and having just come out of a car 30 years old, it's a little bit of a shock because B and C pillars are absolutely huge in here. Now it's this kind of stuff, overtaking cyclists. That's where I have the biggest problem with this car. You see, that engine and gearbox don't seem to play all that well together. For a car called the Citycarver, what I really expect it to be able to do is to be nippy, to be able to pop out into a gap in the traffic the moment I tell it to. And this just doesn't do that very well at all. Allow me to demonstrate. Now I've put the car in dynamic mode, so everything's in its sportiest, most aggressive setting. And let's pretend I'm pulling out at a junction, shall we? So we've got a little bit of visibility here, so I'm going to come to a stop. And so here's my junction, got my foot on the brake, I'm looking. Oh, there's my gap, foot down. It's weird. There's a moment of nothing, then I'm pretty sure it tried to spin a wheel, then it revs all the way out, and then I lifted a foot and it kind of revved up. There's a bit of a flare of revs there, and it all seemed to get very confused. And it didn't do anything particularly briskly. Now, even with only 116 horsepower, it should still move off the line quite well, and it just doesn't. So if this is your first car, you're going to have to get used to the fact that it's not the most rapid to sort of pull away in. Turning circle is really quite good, which is handy. And the engine does have, as you might expect from a turbocharged unit, quite a bit more pull from low down than the little Kia. It certainly feels an amount faster. Not 16 grand quicker, admittedly, but it certainly is a brisker car. Brakes are quite responsive, not overly servoed, I have to say. And ABS works quite well, it would turn out. We've had a lot of rain recently, and so it's pushed all of the crap in the fields onto the roads, and this car has taken that in its stride. There are sadly no paddles for the S-tronic gearbox. If you want to override it, the only way to do so is to move the lever over and then operate it the wrong way round, which is to push forward for up and to pull towards you for down. Why companies insist on doing it that way, I don't know, but I suspect it's because that's what people think it should be, and they're wrong. I liked old school car companies where they did things the right way, and if you thought it went the other way around, that was your fault for being stupid. One thing that has amazed me is the fuel economy of this car. It's been really very good. I took it on a pretty long run the other day, which isn't always actually best for these small cars. I do sometimes find that little turbocharged units on a motorway don't get the economy you'd expect. This one, I'm happy to report, did very well indeed, and got just shy of 50 miles to the gallon. In fact, in the last sort of 200 miles, this car's averaged 47.6. That is excellent. That is genuinely very good. The main thing bugging me at the minute is the smell of the fabric seats. I know it sounds like a really weird, super elitist, snobby thing to say, but they do just smell and feel like pretty cheap seats. They're not uncomfortable, they're reasonably firm, but they're fine, they're nice enough. But when you're buying into an Audi and you're spending a lot more money than you have to on a car of this size, there are little things I would just expect to get. Electrically adjustable seats, a bit of leather or leatherish or something. But I checked on the Audi configurator and I don't think those are even an option in this car. That really is a bit of a shocker. So much else about this does feel like sort of pint-sized proper Audi that to skimp on those things seems just a bit odd. That being said, next week I'm heading up to Scotland and this would be an excellent car for doing that journey. It really is just as well suited to the longer stuff as it is carving around the city. So when your daughters come home from uni and you need to pop out to the shops and you want to steal her car, how fun is it? Actually, it's quite a laugh. It's amazing how far gearboxes have come on, and this is now what Audi, I suppose, would consider an entry-level gearbox. It's really nice to use. No, it doesn't deliver race car-like shifts, but it's smooth, does what you tell it to, and it's actually pretty nice. I wish this thing was the right way around, but other than that, you can have a lot of fun in this car. Now, of course, it's not that fast, but Audi do make a quicker one. In fact, you can have anything up to a 200 horsepower engine in this car. We're unlikely to see another S1, so that's probably as close as we're ever going to get. The suspension at speed becomes actually rather supple and is very well judged. Surprisingly so, actually. That engine sounds quite gruff in the way that 3 cylinders often do. Not a particularly nice thing to listen to, and for that reason I haven't even bothered with an exhaust cam on this video. That and the reason I couldn't actually find it. It's under there somewhere, but not where you'd expect it to be. The great thing is as well, you can thrash the living daylights out of a car like this and you'll barely be troubling the speed limit in most cases. As a driving experience when you're pushing on, it's definitely quicker and more capable than the Picanto. Its larger size really, I think, helping in that regard, and it does feel like a slightly better put together car. Is it worth double? That's tricky. If you do genuinely want a little city car, I probably would still go with the Kia or one of Kia's other products. The Audi's got a lot more on it, but I have to question how much of that I would actually use, especially when for 15 grand you can get a Picanto which is just as well equipped as this. Now I know really it's something like the Rio or even a Ceed that maybe is better compared with a car like this, but if you want a city car, you really actually truly want a city car, I think you want one as small as you can get it. And if you want then a VW product, maybe you should go and buy an Up or something like that instead. That is going to be better suited to your needs. But as a small, daily drivable car, which if you do need to put 4 people in, is going to be relatively comfortable for all of them and has capacity for a little bit of luggage, the Citycarver's all right. The slightly raised nature of it and the funky styling would, I think, appeal to a younger crowd, and if someone came to me and was desperate on spending this amount of money on a first car, they could do worse. I, of course, would always try and persuade them to buy something much, much worse as a first car, but hey, not everyone's going to listen. I personally think the old A2 was a superb piece of engineering, a really forward-thinking car, and was sadly just a little bit too ahead of its time. That is actually the car really that you should probably buy. Fantastic little thing, but sadly, with it being old and diesel, you're going to be penalised for owning something like that. A real shame, because it was an extraordinary feat, that car. Audi really at their finest. There we go. Hope that's given you a little bit of information to help decide whether the Citycarver is the right thing for you or not. Please like, comment below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you all for the next one. Bye bye.